The Great Swamp Watershed Association has given the Marcellus Hartley Dodge Memorial Award to extraordinary individuals who have had a remarkable impact on creating the Great Swamp National Wildlife Refuge, on preserving the watershed that feeds that National Wildlife Refuge, and on protecting and preserving the environment and open space of the state of New Jersey. You're about to meet them. Without their efforts in New Jersey, we would not have a Great Swamp Watershed, a Great Swamp National Wildlife Refuge, and we wouldn't enjoy some of the most rigorous environmental protection and open space preservation anywhere in the United States. We owe them a great vote of thanks.
A long time ago, in the early 70s, there was a cartoon character by the name of Pogo who said, "We have met the enemy and it is us." So in terms of identifying the cause and the problems that we face, it is actually the proliferation of human habitation and the works of man that we have to protect ourselves against. Because for a number of reasons, we have a tendency to kill the things we love the most, whether it's a piece of open space or a river or the ocean or whatever it is. In seeking our own self-satisfaction, we seem to find ways to destroy those things, perhaps inadvertently, and perhaps only in increments, but nevertheless destroy. So far we haven't learned that lesson completely, and in fact in many places we haven't learned it at all.
I recognized very early that protecting the environment requires controlling land use. Land use was the key to environmental protection. Got involved with the Great Swamp when Chris Daggett, who was serving as DEP commissioner under Governor Kane, called me one day and said, "We're having a big debate about the expansion of a sewer treatment plant in Chatham. We'd like to put together a task force made up of all the interested parties." So for 3 years we worked very hard to understand the basin surrounding the Great Swamp. What came out of that was the 10 towns in the basin working together to protect the Great Swamp. It's been a model for the state, and it was a real piece of work. Now, of course, we have the issues of trying to protect the water in the highlands. And I was on the State Planning Commission when we first created the State Plan. And all of those things have been because how you control land use, how you treat land use, and how you manage growth to not sprawl all over the landscape has basically been what I've been doing all these years. This state has been able to provide water for its citizens in all these very densely populated areas because we have protected some. That's why the highlands is so important. It's why the Great Swamp is so important. The Great Swamp basically helps us to keep the Passaic River working. I'm not sure that it works as well as it can. That's why the job is never over.
Since World War II, we've seen the combination of the American dream, the open road dream of Americans, and American tax policies, which to a great extent at the local level gear around property taxes, drive a bulldozer through the American landscape. That gave me the incentive. I have watched the disappearance of, the virtual disappearance of valleys and mountains that I've loved. I think these resources are important to all of us in every way, not just in terms of a sustainable environment, which is important enough in its own right, but in terms of quality of life. There is nothing that gives me more enjoyment than being in a place like this where we are trying very hard to save this piece of property now in conjunction with various environmental organizations, the Great Swamp Watershed Association and the New Jersey Conservation Foundation. This is the headwaters of the Great Brook, the absolute headwaters of the Great Brook. There are aspects of this that just bring peace to me, and I am so delighted that I found it. my children respond to it. I guess it's the child in all of us. So in a nutshell, there's a lot at stake all around the world. And we have to have, I believe very strongly that if you leave it to others, it's never going to happen. And by it, what I mean is the confluence of the economic future of the world with the concept of sustainability and also a reawakening of urban peoples to all the liberating and life-enriching experiences that are to be had in the natural environment.
When I was a volunteer in my hometown, and it was called the Cora Hartshorn Arboretum, and I took school children around. And so as I walked around the Arboretum with these school children asking me questions, I came to have a much greater understanding and appreciation and love of the land itself, so that when Earth Day came in 1970, I was really ready to be part of the environmental movement. Although Leopold, who was with the Park Service in, I think, the late 1940s, is probably regarded as one of the fathers of the environmental movement. The quote from Aldo Leopold is that we abuse land because we regard it as a commodity that belongs to us. When we see land as a community to which we belong, we may begin to treat it with love and respect. We cannot regard this land that we own, no matter how small or how large, as just a commodity or property that we can do what we want with. That we have to be committed to realizing that this land creates a community and we are part of the community.
The Great Swamp battle was a catalyst for much of the activity that's gone on since. We have new organizations that have come into this area. They're working throughout New Jersey. We suddenly realized that some of our most precious and valuable natural resource areas were about to be destroyed with just unbridled development. But never let our guard down, because you have both very good developers who understand the need to protect important resources, and some very bad ones who have no regard for natural resources whatsoever. The Great Swamp is a perfect example of a place that is greatly needed for wildlife habitat and for recreational purposes too. So we must always be vigilant, keep working constantly to set aside what is really unusual in New Jersey, and the time is running out very fast.
I think there's always been a tension in America between exploiting natural resources and conserving them. And there's a lot of education and changing of the culture that's necessary to get that straight. And it comes down to this. It comes down to whether land is a resource or a commodity. And it requires work by a lot of people, and in particular a lot of volunteers, to move the culture to do what we need to do to conserve land. The conservation process is taking place in a democracy, and it takes a certain amount of public participation, even debate, which at times is raucous, in order to move the ball forward. That requires an army of volunteers. I think that's what it's all about. I think that the conservation is of the people, by the people, and for the people. And without that push, it's very much a democratic process, as Teddy Roosevelt once famously said. And I think that the lessons of Aldo Leopold have to be retaught and relearned and reabsorbed in every generation. As Santayana said, the one who forgets to remember is doomed to repeat.
Environmental education exists today because we are such a society and a culture of disconnect. We've become disconnected from those very systems that sustain our lives. And so the educational process needs to be one that brings facts to our understanding, but also an experience. It's the full experience of being connected to the real world that sparks the imagination and quickens the heart to change attitudes and our behaviors that will encourage us then and motivate us to preserve this natural treasure which is ours.
When we heard in this area that the Port of New York Authority was hoping to build a jet port in the Great Swamp, we recoiled with horror. It led not only to a meeting or two that saved the swamp, but it also led to one of the greatest ecological movements in all of New Jersey history. It led not only to the saving of the swamp, but it led as well to several Green Acres bills which have assured ecological beauty in the state of New Jersey. I truly believe that if the Port of New York Authority had not threatened to build a jet port in the Great Swamp, that it would now have been eaten away with garbage dumps or housing in the wetlands. Saving the swamp led to a much, much greater and broader ecological movement in the state of New Jersey. I believe that it's the very base on which modern ecological saving is based. It led to, for example, 7 or 8 Green Acres bills which have poured millions of dollars, almost $1 billion, into ecological causes. New Jersey is very much aware of the need to preserve space now.
It is a showcase in this nation. It's the first piece of wilderness that was ever put in the National Wilderness System, and that was no small accomplishment. It was just a miracle. We were all pioneers. It wasn't just one person, it was just hundreds of people who joined with us from across the country. If we hadn't had Governor Kane there in support of what we were doing and being a firm believer that this is the way that you treat land and the way you protect land, we couldn't have accomplished what we did. We've got to continue to build that bridge from the past to the future. And that does not mean that there can only be one part of the bridge. The bridge has 2 sides. And you've got to have that connection to your public lands and your water and your clean air, or this country will not remain strong. And its people will not remain the vibrant people that they are today with the quality of life that they have today.
I just want to tell you that you are my hero, my mentor, and most importantly, of my friends. I just got to tell you, I love you.
You and I go back probably further than anybody else that's alive now in the conservation field. So I'm really pleased to be here tonight.
In addition to being a devoted advocate on the part of the environment and smart growth and all of those things, she's just a wonderful, personable individual, someone that you fall in love with almost from word one. She's been extremely kind to me over the years, and I've just developed a tremendous affection for her on top of the tremendous respect that I have for her. She is someone who has truly left her mark on the state of New Jersey, and I shudder to think what this state would be like without Candy Ashmun's contributions over the years.
When I think of Candy, I think of one of the environmental icons of the state. She has had a powerful influence on the success of the environmental movement, and I attribute it to her leadership, her passion for the environment, and her intellect. And as I think back on all that we've accomplished in New Jersey, it's just hard to imagine that ever having been possible without someone like Candy.
I can't think of anyone who has epitomized the perseverance, dedication, knowledge, and leadership that you have in the Pine Lands Protection effort. I am proud to consider you a mentor, and I wish you many years of good luck to come.
Thank you for the support that you've given me over the years on different issues. It's just been a wonderful relationship.
If there were more Candy Ashmuns in this state, this would really be a great place, in my opinion.
Thank you for being you, for doing what you needed to do to protect the pines so that I and so many other people could fall in love with it. Cheers to living a meaningful life and doing what you need to do and paying it forward to future generations. So thank you, Candy.
Candy, on behalf of not only myself, but the people of New Jersey, thank you for all the years of service you provided to us. We have a healthy environment, better opportunity in New Jersey to breathe clean air, clean water, because of your efforts.
We're very grateful to have her have all these decades of service for protecting the environment in New Jersey, local, regional, statewide issues. And I personally am thankful to have had her as a mentor, both at ANJAC and the New Jersey Highlands Coalition, and as a fellow Smithy. So Candy, I congratulate you, and please don't stop. We all need your advice and wise counsel.
You have a gift that's wonderful of really not, as some people say, crystallizing the opposition, respecting them, but, keeping a focus on what should happen and moving that forward. You're an inspiration. Everybody, my kids have been thoroughly schooled in the Candy Ashmun School of Civic Leadership. And God bless you, Candy. You're very special, and your example is going to last for a long time with a lot of very important people who are doing good things because they're following in your footsteps. God bless you, and it has been such a pleasure, being by your side in some of these matters. God bless you, Candy.
It was about a year into my working with the coalition, and we were involved in the Highlands Council's adoption of the Highlands Regional Master Plan. And I remember you and I were really getting into some very heady stuff about policy stuff about TDR and how this whole thing was going to work. And you had said to me at one point, Elliot, you can call me at any time. And then I realized I'm now part of this movement when you said that. And you continue to encourage me. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. Keep up the good work.
Not even thinking about all the other wonderful things you've done for the state of New Jersey, the best is that you've been just a terrific friend for me and of mine for the last 50 years. And I am grateful for it. I was grateful at the time. I've been grateful ever since. I've always valued the advice you've given me, even when sometimes it was unsolicited. But in all seriousness, you've been just a true friend, and I hope that you continue to serve this state for many years to come. You've done a job that is unequaled and unrivaled in the state of New Jersey. So thanks. Thank you.
It's been very great to know you, and this wonderful what you've done for New Jersey's environment, and of course New Jersey's environment. People have spread far from New Jersey, so your influence goes way beyond New Jersey's borders. So again, great for everything you've done, and keep on doing it, because we all love you. Thank you.
Basically, you got me going in the environmental movement. And I just want to thank you, because if it wasn't for you being so open and reaching out to me and recognizing how this was, you know, a passion for myself, then I may not have gone that way. So I really want you to know that you inspired me. Thank you for having that vision, being such a modern woman way back then, to pull in new blood, to be open with and generous with your knowledge, and many, many, many years of happiness to you yet.
My first real memory of Candy that has stuck with me, I think, is when I went off to graduate school after working for the Conservation Foundation for a couple of years, and I had met Candy, but I really didn't know her very well at all. And I knew of her, of course, she was like this renowned person, and I called Dave Moore and said, well, I want to do this paper on state planning, and can you help me? And he said, no, you should call Candy Ashmun. And I was thinking, I could call Candy Ashmun, do a graduate school paper. She's like this important person, she's got things to do, and all right, Dave said, you just gotta call her. And I called her, and she was so incredibly generous with her time and her thoughts, and shared more than I needed for this paper. I really didn't even have to even talk to anybody else. And it just struck me that she was willing to talk to someone who, she didn't know whether I would ever come back to New Jersey, whether I would really ever go into the field that she was so passionate about, that she just was such a generous person in that way. And I think that speaks to her, you know, her mentoring of people.
I think that your most valuable contribution is not so much what you've done for the environment in New Jersey, but what you've done for the future of the environment in New Jersey. So from the bottom of my heart, I thank you for recruiting, for mentoring, for leading generations of environmentalists in New Jersey, because we could not do it without you, and we wouldn't be here without you. Thank you.
She would often call me up on the phone and go, and tell me about this, that, and the other thing that should be done. You couldn't really stop her from talking. And you didn't want to, because she was often right. So Candy, congratulations, but also thank you for all you've done.
We really need models, role models, and you've been an incredible one for how we can sustain our passion over years and decades, never give up hope even when things seem dark and gloomy, and just continue to be inspired by the vision that you've had and that we all share for a better, stronger state for our kids and grandkids and those that come long after we do. So thank you for what you've done. It's an incredible legacy, one that we all cherish, and every person that lives in the state, most of whom may never know your name, but all of whom are greatly indebted to you. So, thank you.
Candy, you were on the commission when I started in '79, and you were there when I retired in 2009. It was wonderful having someone with such stable convictions for 30 years. Thank you.
Candy, you've been an inspiration to me for probably 40 years. It's been a pleasure to work with you and to watch you and what you've done and what you've accomplished. One of your many legacies is the institutional change that you've helped make in the state. And finally, and probably most importantly, you've been a friend. And that has meant more than anything else. I cherish your friendship, and I hope it continues between the two of us for a couple more decades. Love you, kid.
I have to appreciate that you gave me guidance, but never heavy-handed. You were always there when I needed to go for advice, but you never pushed me too hard on what you thought maybe I wasn't doing right or how I could have done it better. So I just want to say it's been great having you as my mentor and my advisor over the years.
Candy, this has been an absolutely marvelous opportunity to thank you for the leadership you have provided us, but for being a mentor, for being a friend, for loving my children, for being part of our family. I don't know what we would have done without you as chair of our policy committee. Bill's doing his best to live up to the standards that you set, but you know, we all love you so much, and the kids send you lots of love, and We'll see you soon. It's been a great evening. Bye.
I want to say just thank you so much for 20 years of making sure that I and Pinelands Preservation Alliance stay on the straight and narrow, never lose our focus, always take up the issues that we need to take up, and for being such a guardian of a place that we all love so much. It's amazing to me that you have had the dedication to stick with this project, protecting the pinelands, for so many years, and have never lost your spirit, have never been discouraged by the setbacks that we all have faced. Because I think you know that if we stick with it and we work together, we're gonna succeed in the long run. We're gonna prevail, and we're gonna save the pinelands. And for that, I want to say thank you very much.
Candy, you've been such an inspiration over these past many years. I feel so lucky to have been able to know you and to be inspired by you.
You know, she's been involved for her entire life on the environment, and it's not, you know, she very easily could be retired. And this is something she continued to do. And I think in an odd way that's really inspiring for someone who's just starting off their career and saying, this is someone who's made the environment their life passion. You know, at the very least, I can show up and try to do the best I can.
I had heard of her because she was a force to conjure with. You know, she was a name that everybody who was in the environmental community was aware of. And years later, I ended up being on the Pinelands Commission, and I was so thrilled to be able to spend that much time with her because she's such a fantastic person.
Shortly after I was hired at NJCF, within a few months' time, they had the 10th anniversary dinner for the Pinelands Commission. And I remember that everyone was so happy that the Pinelands Commission had survived for 10 years and things were going along, and, you know, hopefully it would survive for a lot longer. And of course, here it is, almost 30 years after that, and you know, the Pinelands Commission is still going strong, and you're still a commissioner, which is incredible. But the thing I remember most, I didn't know you very well, and there was a lobbyist for the Builders Association, and he was telling stories about the commission and the commissioners. When he got to you, he said, and then there's Candy Ashmun. And Candy goes to breakfast, and she chews up bulldozers, and she spits them out. And everybody laughed. But I didn't laugh because I didn't know you very well, and I looked over at you and I thought, oh my gosh, that nice lady. And this guy thinks of her as somebody who can just a developer dead in their tracks. And I admired that so much. And that was that moment that you became my hero. And I tell my daughters that story, and I want everybody to tell their kids that story, because that's what it takes to win this fight in the long haul. And I want all of our kids and our grandkids to think of you as their hero. So, congratulations on a continuing fabulous career saving New Jersey, and I hope that we can work together for many years to come.
I'm Julia Summers, Executive Director of the New Jersey Highlands Coalition. Welcome to this celebration of a wonderful life, our shared remembrances of our friend and mentor, Candy Ashmun. We hope you enjoyed the curated videos and the photographs we shared of her. We request that everyone please keep yourself muted unless you are the speaker or the next speaker. If you are the speaker, please unmute yourself at the appropriate time. Further, to everyone who is here, if you have photos or materials of or about Candy that you think should be saved, please know that ANJAC has an Ashmun archive they are expanding, and would be happy to accept what you wish to share and preserve. People have been invited to participate today based on long friendship, admiration, and shared experiences. That said, we are fully aware that there are legions of people to whom Candy was also a mentor, friend, and dependable guide. Many of you have joined us this evening. We do apologize that we cannot give time to everyone. About this evening, we commit to finishing by 7 p.m. at the latest. Believe me, we are trying to pack a lot in. If you want to join the commenters, we hope to have a short time nearly at the end for additional comments. Please send us a message in chat if you are one of those. If we have time, we will try to include you. Also, as in her official obituary, where Candy's family invited people who might want to make a donation to one of her favorite nonprofits in her memory, please consider doing so to the New Jersey Highlands Coalition, ANJAC, Raritan Headwaters Association, or the New Jersey Conservation Foundation. Just 4 days before Candy passed in her sleep at her home, she was advising my colleague Elliot on an editorial he drafted for the Star Ledger. As usual, she gave good advice and he took it. Candy, who was a working member of the New Jersey Highlands Coalition's board until her death, was mentally active and on her game until the end, demanding that people send her work to do and things to read, to think about and discuss. She was amazing. My own reflections on what Candy meant to me in my life and on her impact on protecting the environment of the state of New Jersey are endless and cannot possibly fit here this evening. Suffice to say, she was a hugely important mentor, guide, and friend to me, and much loved by my whole family. She spent many holiday meals with us because her family was not nearby. 2 of my 3 daughters attended Smith College, partly because of her. She was always interested in what they were doing. I followed her and learned from her leadership of the Great Swamp Watershed Advisory Committee, her service on the State Planning Commission and writing of the state plan, to the Pinelands Commission, and the regional planning and implementation she did there, truly part of her life's work. Such a great lady. I will always owe her a huge debt of gratitude and remember her fondly with love. And now, I introduce the first of many people who worked with and admired her, whom you will hear from this evening. The first chair of the State Planning Commission and fellow New Jersey Highlands Coalition trustee, Jim Gilbert.
Okay, hope everybody can hear me. So I'm retired now from a lot of things, and please excuse me for referring to some notes because Candy is such a special person. I wanted to get in everything I was thinking. But although I'm retired, you know, I'm still active in family things because I started so late. And my wife, Kathleen, and our kids are here with me tonight. And for the record, I'm one of those retired Wall Street guys who hasn't gone to jail yet. On the non-business side, my life transitioned from being a political junkie to the planning side of government about 40 years ago. And I wound up as president of the New Jersey Federation of Planning Officials. And that's how I met Candy, because she was the éminence grise of ANJAC, a very scary lady. So when we both wound up on the State Planning Commission, I as chairman, I knew I needed a lot of expert help, and there was Candy. You know, she helped me shape an agenda for the next 12 years with the Planning Commission and to set out a plan for sensible growth for New Jersey. Now, the reason I turned to Candy was because she was like a breath of fresh air. Kind, gentle, but powerful. And a truth teller. Someone who was so obviously of high intellect and character that those qualities in her can only be described as exemplary. She was always one of the grown-ups in the room. And she was always a most persuasive voice to power. Candy understood, as few others do, the connection between our endangered environment and proper land use and development, and how powerful good science can be in clarifying that connection. Now, on the human side, she was a lot of fun, as most of you know. Julia, in her instructions for tonight, mentioned raising a glass of Chardonnay. Well, before her health dictated otherwise, Candy and I used to share a one martini habit, a beverage obtained perfectly timed just before the call to dinner so that you could only have one. And then there were her 4 boyfriends, other than her dear husband, Charles. They were our 2 governors, Florio and Kane, Richard Sullivan, who I believe was the first Department of Environmental Protection Commissioner, and Frank Parker at the Highlands Commission. All what I would call soulmates in good government. Frank Parker, who was a heavy-duty, big-time New York City lawyer, was her chauffeur to Pinelands meetings. And I remember many stories from her of how Frank crawled over his passenger to the cockpit of his ancient auto, in which the driver's side door had permanently rusted shut. Understanding such quirky habits of older people could be a challenge, as our 2 kids can tell you. I will always remember Candy's deep love of being in the surf, casting for fish at Martha's Vineyard and the Carolina coast. But most of all, I always will regard her as a great model of citizenship, a role model for anyone, but especially for Kathleen and me and for our 2 children who have grown up with the knowledge of how much I revered and loved this great woman. So God bless her through all eternity. And now I want to introduce another wonderful lady in this movement, Michele BYERS.
Hi, everyone. I just want to say a couple of quick things. One is Candy, as probably all of you know, was just one of my first bosses, right there with Dave Moore, incredible mentor and a really, really good friend. And I know she loved me and I loved her, and it really gave me the opportunity to do a lot of things in my life I never, ever would have been able to do without her. One of the things that I really miss is our conspiring and plotting. I had so much fun with Candy back in the Pinelands Commission days. After a commission meeting, we'd go for drinks at Braddock's Tavern with some of the other commissioners, and we would all plot and conspire as to what we had to do to make sure that the votes went right at the Pinelands Commission. And we conspired on who the next executive director would be, and how to get rid of the ones we didn't like, and how to get good commission members. We conspired on all of that on the state plan. When I stepped onto the State Planning Commission, we were doing the same thing all the time about the plan, writing the plan, who are the commission members and the staff, and oh my God, what's wrong with them? Why are they rewriting that section? That section was fine. Let's get rid of this person. we had a lot of fun with the plotting. But some of the plotting that we did was really exciting. And one was when we took Frank Parker out to lunch and sat him down, and Candy and he got their martinis out. And Candy and I said to him, we're going to name this 10,000 acre property in the Pinelands for you. And he said, oh, no, you're not. And we said, oh, yes. Have another martini. And, he was like extremely embarrassed by it. And did not want us to do it, but I think in the long run, I think he was pretty proud of it. Then the other very exciting conspiring we did was when we needed a leader at the Highlands Coalition. And Candy and I got on the phone and said, oh, well, there's no question. we're going to go get Julia and she's going to do it. She was very happy at the Great Swamp Watershed at the time, but we called her in and we said, Julia, you're going to be the new director of the Highlands Coalition. And she said, I am? There was no going back. I hope you remember the story the same way I do, Julia. I remember sitting in my office at Bamboo Brook with Candy, and you said yes. And I think that was one of the best things that we've done for the state of New Jersey was to recruit Julia in that job. And of course, Candy did an amazing job with the Environmental Summit to pull people together. There's so many disparate views and personalities at the Environmental Summit, and I think that was probably one of her hugest legacies, was to try and keep all of these crazy environmental tree huggers together and working together the best that we could. So I don't know who I'm going to plot with going forward. There's so much more to do, and I miss her all the time. And thank you all for putting this together. And you know, let's keep this going. Keep her legacy and her life alive. Thank you.
So now Ed Lloyd is going to join us.
Michelle signed me up for continuing plotting. I'm always happy to do that. I've had the incredibly great fortune to have known Candy as a friend, as a mentor, as a valued colleague, and as an inspiration for over 45 years. And I know I share that good fortune with everybody on this call and a lot more folks around the state. Candy persuaded me to join two organizations that she had already played a leadership role in for decades. The Pinelands Commission, of course, and the Fund for New Jersey Board. Her guidance and mentorship in those venues educated me for years. I learned more from Candy about the Pinelands and public policy in our memorable lunches at the Vincenttown Diner. Michelle, I missed the Braddock Tavern. Obviously, you had the better of it. Vincenttown Diner was a wonderful place, but no alcohol. In any event, Candy and I and other commissioners often went to Vincenttown Diner after our bi-weekly meetings to discuss what had happened, to just strategize on how to go forward, and not just on the Pinelands, but the Highlands, the environment of the whole state. Candy would sit back and enjoy her grilled cheese sandwich and her tomato soup and enrich us with her decades of knowledge about her beloved Pinelands. She earned the title of Godmother of the Pinelands many times over. I keep Candy's Bible near at all times to continue her tutelage. Of course, that Bible is the often forgotten first volume of the Pinelands Comprehensive Management Plan. Her vision in that document still guides the Pinelands Commission. Candy was also the godmother of public policy at the Fund for New Jersey. She served on the board of the fund for nearly as long as she served on the Pinelands Commission. It's fitting that her service on each board ended only with her passing. She never stopped. And as I said, she hasn't stopped yet. The fund is about to celebrate its 50th anniversary. In my last conversations with Candy, which was only a couple days before she passed, she shared her vision of the initial goals of the fund and how they must continue. She was the institutional memory at the fund, just as she was at the Pinelands. Candy will continue to teach us through the education exhibit at the Pinelands Commission headquarters and the Forked River Mountain Preserve that both bear her name. I miss my pal Candy. She will be emulated for generations, but she'll never be replaced. Thanks, Candy. I'm happy to introduce another of Candy's great friends. There are many of us on this Zoom, Abby Fair. Abby?
I first met Candy when she was giving the 5-session ANJEC Environmental Commissioners course. And that was the first exposure I really had. I'd been out of the country for a long time. We just moved to New Jersey, and somehow or other I ended up on the commission in my town. It was great. She set me on the right path. And that commissioner's course was wonderful and continues to be wonderful. It not only gave us information about the natural resources, but it also was, and she was especially good at this and empowered us very well, to go back to our towns and be effective in our towns, trying to protect the environment. I just have a short anecdote to tell you. I called her many times. She always responded, as other people have noted. And I decided that I wanted to have a regional meeting. We were having a terrible drought at some point in the, I guess the late 70s in New Jersey. And I asked Candy if she would be a speaker. Oh yes, of course. And aside from that, she said, how are you publicizing it? She said, well, come on out, I'll show you what to do. So she taught me how to do a stencil. She taught me how to use the mimeograph machine. And we got the publicity out, and we had a really good showing at the meeting. Anyway, that was good. She's a hands-on, she was a hands-on one. Great. The other extensive contact I had with Candy was the Great Swamp Watershed Advisory Committee. We called it GSWAC. DEP pulled it together because we had some rather nasty characters in a 10-town watershed who couldn't agree on anything. Well, Candy had us meeting, I think she mentioned it in one of the clips, for 3 years. And by God, at the end of that, we ended up agreeing on a very important piece of local legislation, which was the no net increase stormwater management ordinance. This was quite an accomplishment, but it helped move forward more responsible development in the watershed. So those are my two big stories about Candy. She was an amazing one, just amazing. I close by remembering Candy's patience with me in the face of my computer idiocy. Her good humor, her generosity, her calm composure and wisdom at all times. Thank you. I now call on Mark LaBauer.
I first met Candy when I was appointed to the Pinelands Commission in 2011. I'd heard about her before that, of course. She'd long been an important figure for environmentalists around the Garden State, as we've heard tonight, preserving the Great Swamp, serving on the State Planning Commission, and founding ANJEC. For me, though, her greatest contribution was at the Pinelands. She lobbied the state hard for preservation of the region in the 70s. She made such an impression on Governor Byrne that he appointed her among the first group of Pinelands commissioners. Her first duty there was to write the Comprehensive Management Plan, perhaps the most successful regional planning document ever. It is the set of rules that guides all of our activity at the Commission. And then came the years of hard-fought Commission decisions that established the validity of the Comprehensive Management Plan. By the time I met her, she was in her 33rd year serving on the Pinelands Commission. She was in her late 80s, and yet she was still the most outspoken commissioner on the board. I'd like to share the first conversation that I had with her. I told her how much I admired her work at the commission and that I hoped to follow her example. I said she must feel proud to have accomplished what must have seemed impossible back in the 70s, the preservation by law of the Pine Barrens. And I asked her, was she relieved that everything had worked out, that she had won, and that the preservation of the Pinelands was universally established despite years of pushback from developers, from miners, bloggers, farmers, and homeowners? Well, she looked at me, not with a smile, but with a serious, intent look, and said, Mark, the battle is never over. There are always people who want to take advantage of this beautiful ecosystem. It's our job to stay strong, to protect these pines and the water beneath, now and for generations to come. The fight will never end. You have to prepare for that. That was my first lesson of many from my dear friend, Candy Ashmun. I will always be grateful to her, and I will miss her forever. And now I'd like to introduce Candy's very good friend and the executive director of the Raritan Headwaters Association, Cindy EHRENCLOU.
So Julia, you told us to tell stories that were a little personal, and I was lucky to know Candy most of my life. So I'm going to talk about dining with Candy. So you might know that Candy was not a food snob, and consequently we had lots of fun meals out together where you could say food was less important than the company. So lunches. And I'm not sure when I was first included in the Policy Girl lunches, but I love being one of Candy's girls. Julia, Michelle, Sandy, Allison, we began our meals with rounds of family news. We shared photos of kids, and by the time dessert arrived, we were deep in New Jersey politics, each of us fixed on Candy's words of wisdom. A lot of ideas and directives came out of those long lunches. So another dining with Candy tale that doesn't sound like one, but I'll get there. Sometime in recent years, I became Candy's emergency contact. Her kids lived in distant states, and my husband and I lived right around the corner. So for a while there, Candy and I made what seemed like regular trips to the emergency room. She was always such a good sport, so apologetic for being a bother, never admitting to being uncomfortable despite hours and hours of being stuck in hallways and temporary rooms. And sometimes there was an overnight, but on more than one occasion, we said goodbye to our new friends as everybody had fallen in love with her. We left a crumpled up hospital gown on the bed, a half-eaten cup of Jell-O on the tray, and we made a beeline to her favorite Basking Ridge bistro. So 30 minutes later, Candy was in front of a glass of Chardonnay, a plate of calamari, and we were both snickering and toasting our brilliant exit from Morristown Memorial Hospital. So now Cafe Rustica is not exactly five-star dining. The calamari's pale, the house Chardonnay is, but Candy loved it all. Entrees are humongous, and they arrive with a tall spike of rosemary. I can't figure that out. Very confusing. But Candy just loved being with her friends and family in this easy down the road spot, and the staff knew never to allow red pepper anywhere near Mrs. Ashmun's food. They also know she would end every meal with a big bowl of chocolate ice cream. So many of us enjoyed these Friday night dinners with Candy at this funny little restaurant. We always ran into Chris and B. Daggett, which tells you a lot about Chris's cuisine. And Candy genuinely had genuine joy in being with her friends. And so it was so worth it. We went there time after time just to be with her. So I'm gonna miss our dinners at Rustica, and I vow to make it a tradition to return in memory of our cherished friend, always admired, and just love that Candy. Thank you for listening. And I am going to introduce Carleton Montgomery, the Executive Director of the Pinelands Alliance and a friend to Candy. Carleton.
Hello, everybody. My relationship with Candy began with and really revolved around the Pinelands. As everybody knows, Candy was a founding member of the Pinelands Commission and a tireless defender of the Pines, literally to the day she died. She really was a fixed star in the Pinelands universe, a fount of wisdom based on unequaled experience and commitment, a savvy but never jaded strategist in that never-ending struggle to hold back the forces of destruction. She was also a demanding leader of our movement, one of those few individuals who really became our conscience, at least my conscience, and the very embodiment of the worldview and values that are so central to our personal and professional identities. I think of probably everybody on this meeting. And she also was the embodiment of the fact that no matter how good the law is that you pass or the rules or the plan that you adopt, they are meaningless unless smart, capable, energetic people are put in charge of implementing those laws. She knew that, and her contribution, I think, that is unequaled is was her ability to always put issues at the Pinelands Commission into context in ways that were persuasive to either turn decisions in the right direction or at least delay them long enough that maybe bad decisions went away. The day I started work at the Pinelands Preservation Alliance in May 1998, Candy called me to introduce herself and to make sure I was wasting no time getting to work. I think it was specifically actually on Pinelands Commission appointments, you know, the never-ending issue. And so there wasn't going to be any easy transition for me into this completely new job in a completely new place. But from that day on, I always knew that I was answerable for my actions to Candy, but also that she was always there to talk, to provide encouragement, to bring the big view, the long view, and the long game, and to support all of us who shared her passion. But for the Pinelands, I have no idea where, or in some ways, who I would be today. I'll be forever grateful to Candy. She played an essential role in the Pinelands, and so she played an essential role in my life and my ability to build a life around the Pinelands. I miss her, and I miss knowing that she is standing guard. And so before I get too teary, I am going to introduce Dave PEIFER.
I want to give my thanks to Candy because she changed my life. And I want to share with you a story about how it came to be that I worked in the field of the environment in New Jersey. It was 1978. I had a John Denver haircut. And a friend of mine, Kathy Ellis from Drew University, who worked at ANJEC, told me that there was a job available. If I had been unemployed for 6 months and would qualify for the CETA program, which was a wonderful government program that was designed to retrain the unemployed. I had been unemployed for 6 months, and I went in for an interview with this strange woman who I never met before, and the interview was perfect. I felt at ease. Candy seemed to be at ease, and she seemed to get whatever it was she wanted very quickly from me. And then the illustration of how Candy knew how things worked happened. Very interestingly, she said, "Now, I want to offer you a job. What you need to do is go down to the unemployment office on Monday morning at 10 o'clock and tell them you want to work in the environmental field," which I did. And after a brief interview, I was given the job. The important thing to remember here is that everyone walked away happy. I got a job. The person at the unemployment office was thrilled because she could actually place someone in a job they wanted. And Candy got an employee at no cost to ANJEC because the federal government picked up the tab. At that time, we were involved with a staff of about 26 people at ANJEC, and it came to be pretty clear that we referred to Candy as the boss. Over the years, the people that passed through ANJEC's doors have gone on to become what I still refer to as the gang. There are dozens, perhaps hundreds, of people who Candy has set on the path of protecting the environment. I was glad to hear the statement that the battle is never over earlier, because it isn't. We have to pass the torch, we have to move ahead, And we are fighting things now that were visible but not perceived very accurately at the time I started in 1978. Global climate change, despite whatever else is going on, is going to change each and every one of our lives. The important thing for me is that Candy believed and knew in her bones that science was the advisor to policy, but it wasn't automatic. It had to be engineered, it had to be animated through personal action and advocacy. So with all of that, I have to say that one of the first things that Candy did, even before she came to ANJEC, was to do the first watershed-wide water quality inventory in the Upper Raritan watershed. And that inventory characterized the water at that time as healthy but enriched, and pinpointed a number of egregious point source sewer plants that were discharging into that river. Since that time, those plants have been closed, and today the water is still healthy but enriched. I hope that we can move the needle and make the water just plain healthy. Thank you. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, somebody that I have the pleasure of working with, Sandy Batty, the former director of ANJEC.
Thanks, Dave. I had the good fortune of knowing Candy my whole life. She and her husband, Chill, were good friends with my parents. So when I came to ANJEC, I had a hard time calling her anything but Mrs. Ashmun. However, I soon learned that everyone called her Candy, and that was how she wanted to be addressed. This, of course, is a sign of her openness and willingness to work with everyone who wanted to improve the environment of New Jersey. Over my years at ANJEC, I gained appreciation of the role she played at the dawn of the environmental movement. I think Dave, Abby referred to this. And as I traveled around the state to attend workshops and meetings, participants would come up to me and explain how they had gained environmental and political expertise from Candy. In the 1970s, she had become ANJEC's first executive director, and the field of environmental science was new. Candy was not about to do things by half. As Abby mentioned, she developed a 2-month-long course for a budding group of environmental commissioners, teaching them about state and local laws, natural resource protection, and the ways that they could use their roles as commissioners to protect the environment. And that was all part of Candy's grit and determination that brought her success through her career. To say that Candy was tough is an understatement. One day at ANJEC, I got a call from Candy, who at the time was in her mid-80s. "Sandy," she said, "can you pick me up in Trenton?" I learned that she had had a car accident, rolling her car a couple of times. "I'm fine," she told me, "but they insisted on taking me to the hospital." So I drove to Trenton, but not surprisingly, the hospital staff said they would not release her until she had spent the night in for observation. Of course, she was annoyed, but maintained her good humor with the nurses, especially after I promised to return to free her the next day. So the characteristic toughness, humor, and of course her intelligence helped her create the legacy that we are celebrating today. And now I'd like to introduce Terry Moore, who was the one of the executive directors of the Pinelands Commission.
And let me first and foremost say that it's nice to see a number of faces I haven't seen in a long time. And you're looking younger than I thought you would. Maya Angelou wrote a poem that began that a woman in harmony with her spirit is a river flowing. She goes where she will without pretense and arrives at her destination prepared to be herself and only herself. I think Maya did a pretty good job of describing Candy Ashmun in that work. She is and has always been a woman without pretense. And Jim Gilbert is correct. Frank Parker would deliver Candy to a number of commission meetings in the early days in a decrepit, well beyond junkyard eligible little car. And she would, with her large commission meeting packet in hand, climb over the middle to the driver's side and get out in front of all of the assembled people waiting for the commission meeting to begin in the parking lot. At the end of the meeting, she would reverse the process and climb in and over and find her way to the passenger seat. I asked her one day if she ever thought that Frank might get a different car to drive to the meetings, and she said, I doubt it. And I really don't mind because, Terry, I have to tell you, he once picked up George Herbert W. Bush in that car and made him do the same thing. This is the woman who was not pretentious, simply a woman to do what she had to do. Candy was someone who respected and was respectful to her co-commissioners. I cannot ever recall her interrupting a member of the commission who may be going on and on for quite a while in a discussion that was perhaps not relevant to the issue at hand, or one who was espousing a position that Candy was adamantly opposed to. She was always respectful that way, but she was also a bit irreverent. And I can remember Nadine Young, who was the commission's executive assistant, coming to me once or twice or three times and saying in her job description, which was to prepare the commission's minutes of those meetings, that she couldn't quite understand what Commissioner X was trying to propose. And could I listen with her to the tape of the commission meeting so she could get it right? And she would bring in the tape recorder to my office and sit it down and say, oh, Terry, he begins the discussion just after Candy in the background gives this heavy sigh and groan. And Candy did that. And she did it magnificently on more than one occasion. Candy is a caring human being. I don't think you will ever find a member of the staff of the Pinelands Commission in the 20 years that I worked with her there, or the 20 plus years since, that would say anything more than she treated me with respect. She was always interested in what I was doing. And she always had something good to say about what we as a staff were doing. She was a mentor, and my good friend Michelle is a prime example of the caring and mentorship that she always had for the people the young people particularly, that she worked with. Candy and I had a 40-year, not just 20-year professional relationship. We talked frequently about issues affecting New Jersey and issues affecting particularly the Pinelands. That was the professional side of us. I always viewed our relationship in that way as kind of a collaborative conspiracy. And we would invite into that conspiracy Frank Parker and Richard Sullivan and some other members of the commission to figure out how to get 8 votes to do something that we all believed was important for the public policy affecting the state of New Jersey and particularly the Pinelands. We did that a lot. On a personal level, it wasn't necessarily a collaborative activity. It was simply my privilege to be her friend. And I, with all of you, will miss her a lot.
Candy Ashmun was one of the best. She was one of the last of the great New Jersey women who did so much to preserve this state and make it into the place we all want to live and bring up our children. So look, Candy, the Pinelands, Candy, so many environmental issues that she was in front of. I miss her, we all miss her, but by studying Candy, maybe we can inspire some other people to be another Candy and come along and follow her. That's what we all need to do.
Well, I'm pleased to take part in this program celebrating the life of Candy. In some respects, we're celebrating not only her life, but her role as a part of a movement over the last 50 years in New Jersey to heighten the citizens' sensitivity to the importance of the environment. She's worked very hard to lift the level of awareness of people to environmental sensitivity and particularly conservation. New Jersey would be a different place if, in fact, we hadn't paid attention in the way that Candy has advocated for these 50 years. She's been a person that has been an advisor to me, that's been very helpful. She's been a friend, and she's been the face of sensitivity to the environment. One of the things that is most important is her role in motivating people. The leadership that she's provided has been extremely useful to getting people recruited into the environmental movement. New Jersey is a better place as a result of her efforts, and we should be very pleased about what she's done. But she has, over the years, been extremely effective in being the face of the environmental movement, particularly with regard to overdevelopment and inappropriate development, making sure that we understood the need to preserve open spaces in New Jersey. Many people probably will not know Candy's name. I think it's fair to say that the vast majority of people in the state of New Jersey will have benefited from the efforts that she's put in over these last 50 years or so. She's going to be missed by all of us.
Finally, before I close, I want to note the passing of a legendary New Jerseyan, one whose name may not have been recognized in every household, but whose work certainly would be. Candace McKee Ashmun. There she is. She dedicated her public life to the conservation of our state's historic and environmental legacies. She was the last surviving original member of the Pinelands Commission, appointed by Governor Brendan Byrne to ensure that one of our state's true natural gems would be protected for future generations. The heck with states true natural gems. It is one of America's true natural gems. Although she was from Somerset County, she recognized the need for preservation, and she was known as the godmother of the New Jersey pines. She served on numerous other boards and commissions. Her work still guides us. And so we note Candace's passing at the age of 96, and God bless her soul.
Before I say my words, I do have something to say from Tom D'Angelo, who says the following in remembrance of Candy. Sad news to hear about Candy Ashmun today. It was a pleasure working with her in her kind, soft-spoken support of our Association of New Jersey Environmental Commissions. I was privileged to serve on the Board of Trustees in 1972 while working for the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. DEP was 2 years old and ANJEC was 3 years old. Along with Candy, Amy Green, Bob Patterson, Lorraine Caruso, Ron Bond, William Metterhouse, Martha Lieblick, and others from NJDEP, George Corporali and Helen Chase, we dedicated ourselves to our association. I actually started Ecosystems just so I could advertise on our newly updated ANJEC bulletin. Rest in peace, sister. Tom. It is appropriate when remembering Candy to acknowledge the leadership role women play in the environmental movement. And it is a movement that now spans generations with torches to hand off. What would New Jersey look like today without Helen Fensky leading the charge to protect the Great Swamp, or Nancy Shukaitis fighting against the Tox Island Dam? And even nationwide, it was Lois Gibbs who was the lightning rod against the polluters of Love Canal, and Joan Maloof protecting our old growth forests from logging and development. That leadership is very much apparent in New Jersey today, with such women as Julia Summers, Michelle BYERS, Cindy EHRENCLOU, Jennifer Coffey, Anna Baptista, Cindy Zips, Maya Van Rossum, and so many others. And with emerging leaders such as Sylvia Salone and Winnie Hines, they keep us honest and focused in the correct direction. Candy didn't represent a single fight or mission. She blew wind into all of our sails, encouraging us, fine-tuning our strategies, whispering in our ears, and reaching our hearts. She was a mother nature, and many of us were her enviro children, helping us to grow, spread our wings, and most important, be effective. Although Candy is gone, she will continue to provide us with wise counsel. For those who have known her, we know that her spirit will be generous, but unfortunately her guidance and care will not be known to the next generation. If we are to honor the memory of Candy, it will be up to us to be the patient, wise mentors to the next generation. That is the way Candy's spirit will endure. Next, I'd like to hand over to Jen Coffey from ANJEC.
Thank you, Elliot, and thank you everyone for being with us here this evening. I'd like to start by reading some remarks from Lyle Landon, ANJEC's Membership and Development Director, that she wrote for Candy. She says, "From the moment I met Candy, I knew that I was meeting a living legend. Working at ANJEC the last 5 years has given me the opportunity to ask Candy many questions and hear many amazing stories from her and the numerous former colleagues and friends who visited ANJEC and our events to see and talk with her. Candy was always chipper, knowledgeable, and eager to keep learning. Crossing an environmental goal line meant it was time to celebrate and start brainstorming about which environmental race should be entered next. Candy loved environmental work, the progress, the changing team players, the challenges. She was always excited about the next step forward. That was Candy's gift to us, to be enthusiastic model leader." Thank you, Lyle, for sharing that. At this time, we would like to open it up to some of the many people who have joined us today who have not yet had an opportunity to speak. I already have two who have messaged me. If you are interested in speaking, you can use the chat and send a private message to Zach Cole, and he's going to help us MC that list as it comes in. And so we have a good 10 minutes or so that we can spend. At this point, Gary Zelk, ANJAC's board member. Gary, are you still here? This is amazing. I have pages and pages of people. So Gary, if you want to unmute yourself and share with us, that would be great. Thanks, Gary.
Great. Hey, everybody. It's great to see all these familiar faces from over the years and all these great environmentalists. I think you might, a lot of you probably heard the story that JFK said years ago when he was hosting a large group of Nobel Prize winners. And he said, this is probably the largest collection of intellect in the White House, except when Thomas Jefferson dined alone. Well, Candy was kind of that equivalent for the environment, I think, for all of us. Yeah, I got tangled up with ANJAC, happily tangled up with ANJAC back in the, I guess, mid-'80s or late 80s, right about the time Sally Dudley came executive director. And of course, I think within 30 seconds of becoming a trustee, I found out about Candy, and she's like an eagle grabbing a fish, not going to let you go. Candy and I did have a lot of good times together. It turns out that both of us had climbed Oregon's Mount Hood, not in the same year, but we did share that. It was an interesting experience. And Candy and I also did a lot of the site plan review courses, and we started off as the dark side development and engineering company, coming into this town with thousands of units and millions of square feet of development. And of course, there would be no impact in your town. But then we would find out that the town did have some environmental regulations. They had an environmental commission. So we suddenly became enlightened in the second half of that course and became the White Knight Development Company. So we always had a lot of fun with that. And one other time, a little story, and I think, Abby Fair, I think this might have been at your retirement party. Candy was talking about the power of one person, how a person can make a big difference through education and dedication and persistence and so on and so forth. But sometimes that one person needed some help. And I think some of you will recall that Candy also had a very favorite tropical bird. So when she said that, I looked at Candy and I said, so what you're saying, Candy, if one can't, then two can. Well, she gave me a look that wasn't quite malicious, but it seemed to say, don't ever make that pun again. So anyway, Candy, I'm sorry. I had to do it this one more time. And thank you for everything you've done for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Yes, once is enough for that joke. Thank you. Next up, we have Megan Wren. Megan, are you still with us? Again, pages and pages of people. This is fantastic. There you are. If you go ahead. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Sure. Thank you. It's an honor to be here. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Well, so I joined the board of ANJAC back in the early 90s and served for about a decade when I was at the very beginning of my nonprofit role. And it was just amazing to me how Candy, she seemed like she knew everybody in the state, any agency that came up, talk to this person. She was, and she knew not just the people, but how things worked. A lot of people have mentioned that. And I was just in awe to see somebody who had so much knowledge about how to get things done and so much forethought about what needed to be done to head something off at a pass, or, she had the strategy. Her ability to think about strategy was amazing. And just on a personal note, she told me long after the fact that she had served on the committee that made the decisions about funding when I was applying for funding for restoring the A.J. Meerwald, which became New Jersey's official tall ship and the ambassador for all things Delaware Bay. So even though her love and life was focused up in North Jersey, she was making a difference for us down in South Jersey and giving us a legacy that not many people know about, but she was, had a big role in helping us to achieve that goal. And I just felt so honored to be able to spend those, 10 years of monthly meetings in her presence and seeing how things were done, and to have somebody to aspire to, be a tenth of that. And the thing that's really, disappointing to me is that I didn't reconnect when I got into the position that I'm at now with the state planning office, which she was always talking about the state plan and its importance. And I so wish that I had given her a call to let her know that I was working as an advocate for the plan these days. And, I love the fact that in a small way, I'm working towards, a part of her legacy, and the things that she did for the state as a woman, as a leader, are, everybody's mentioned them, but I think we all know that that's only the tip of the iceberg. The number of people that she touched and the issues that she was engaged with and had leadership on were just amazing. And the state is certainly has lost a giant.
Agreed. Thank you, Megan. Thank you for sharing. And now we have an entire family who would like to speak. So we've got the DeVito family.
Hi there. So we both knew Candy in different ways. When I first came to this country and I worked down in the Pine Barrens at White's Bog, Michelle BYERS would tell me that there was somebody who could do some tech support for the one computer that we had, the ancient creaking computer that we had at White's Bog. And so I just assumed it would be some young, tech support person. And instead, the first time Candy walked in, and I think she had a stick at that point, she was, full of vim and vigor. She said, "Oh, this is ridiculous. This computer's way too old. You need to get a new one. We need to write some grants." And she would just dispense advice while she fixed your hardware and told you how to print your mail merge. And then I left that organization, but through NJCF and just being a part of, this extended New Jersey family of environmental advocates, have kept up with Candy. And now I find myself older than her because I guess we were at her 24th official birthday party as a leap year baby. But she's a hero to me, and I think she's a hero to my girls who would like to grow up to be just like Candy. So, yeah.
Oh, Hazel wants me to say something. I was going to be quiet for once. I'll just say really quickly, about 15 years ago, pine beetles were making their first run toward the Pine Barrens and killing a lot of trees. And there was a Pinelands Commission meeting, and everybody was, portraying all sorts of doom at all the pines were going to die, and there wouldn't be any pines if we didn't cut down all the trees. And oh my God, it was incredible. And Candy was a great ecologist, even though she didn't study ecology. She said, "So a lot of trees are going to die?" And one of the foresters said, "Oh, yes, a lot of trees are going to die." And Candy said, "So what?" And that was that. Thanks.
Thanks, Emil. Thanks, Hazel. And Hugh Corolla.
Thank you. Having only started in the field in 1999, I think I am probably the newbie or the new kid on the block when I look at all these amazing people arrayed on my screen here. When I began, I really looked towards people like Candy. Initially, it was people like Andy Wilner and Ed Lloyd, who really brought me into the movement and, kind of taught me the ropes. And of course, my boss, Bill Sheehan. It was Tom Gilmore from New Jersey Audubon who first began to introduce me to people like Andy and to Ed. And he said at one point, he said, "Oh, if you ever get a chance to meet Candy Ashmun, make sure you talk to her, because you can learn a lot from that lady." I mean, a lot. I learn a lot from her all the time. I'm like, "Who is this lady?" And it was probably at the very first conference I'd been to. I think it was land conservation rally, in fact, at Princeton. And I met Candy, and and so we I don't even remember what we talked about, but I just remember just kind of absorbing just so much that I could from her. And I always ran into her at conferences, Angie conferences, NJCF land rallies. The woman probably had enough, conference lanyards to cover Rockefeller Christmas tree. I can only imagine how many she had. And she always had time to talk. She always had a moment to ask you, so how are things going in the Meadowlands? So how are you guys doing? Are you dealing with this? It was always, if you saw her 2 weeks ago, great. If you saw her 2 months ago or a year ago, it didn't really matter. She was always there for us, in our work, in our fight in the Meadowlands. And I'm sure just hearing everybody speak, she was certainly there for everybody else throughout the state, from High Point to Cape May. And I don't have as much of a history with her as so many of you do. I'm really envious of you guys, like Emil, for sure, no doubt about it, bro. But all of us stand on the shoulders of those giants. And I know it's a cliche, but it's so true. So someday may we all be honored the same way we're honoring Candy tonight. So thanks for the time.
Thanks, Hugh. And a note about the lanyards, we do reuse those. So if any of you are hoarding NJAC conference lanyards, we'll take them back when we're allowed to see you again. I do see that we have Beth, Candy's daughter, and I know we have Prue on here, Candy's cousin. And so I want to thank you, of course, for being with us tonight, but for sharing your mom and your cousin with us. Obviously, she meant so much to so many of us, and we miss her an awful lot. So thanks for sharing her with us. I want to share my own remarks before I move it over to Elizabeth Ritter, who is our last scheduled speaker for the evening. And so I met Candy, I'm getting teary-eyed already, here I go. I met Candy when I first entered New Jersey's environmental movement professionally in about my mid-20s. And as many of you or all of you know, I worked for an organization called the Stony Brook Millstone Watershed Association, now the Watershed Institute. And I started going to these environmental summit meetings that some of you have heard about. And Candy started these environmental summit meetings back probably about in the year that I was born. And it was a means for environmental groups to talk with one another and to share information before Twitter and Facebook and online news, and to really build relationships with one another. And so the summit was still going when I came around, and I met Candy, and my immediate reaction was, whoa, I gotta get to know her. And so I shut up a lot when Candy was around and just tried to listen, because she had lifetimes of experience, and I wanted to know what she knew. And I was more than thrilled to hang out after Summit, and she would pull me over and we'd chat and we'd go back and forth, and I'd ask questions and prod, and sometimes not take the same position. And I think she'd take a different position just to prod me. And we had this great conversation that started going back and forth. And after about 10 years of going to Summit, she called me one day, and I was all of about 37 at that point in time. And I was running into the State House to lobby for Green Acres funding, trying to get that sustainable funding that, thank goodness, we have now. And I was just about to enter the garage where you get no cell phone service. And I quickly pulled over because I saw it was Candy Ashmun calling, and you pull over when Candy Ashmun is calling you. I said, hi, Candy, what's up? How can I help you? And she said, Jen, I want to go to lunch. And I said, okay. Great, let's go to lunch. When do you want to go to lunch? Can I come get you? Like, where do you want to go? And she said, well, I have an ulterior motive. And I said, well, I would expect nothing less from you. So what's up? And she said, well, actually, I'm not feeling so well, and I got some things going on, so I don't know if I can make it to lunch, but I want you to think, because Sandy is retiring, and I know you know Sandy, and I know you know land use work, and I want you to think about this position. So
Candy had, you know, tapped me on the shoulder. As you've heard, she's done so many people for generations and generations. And I'm so thankful for that. And I gave her some resistance. And I said, Candy, you know, I've been working at the watershed for 10 years. I really like that job. We're getting a new building. I've had an office in the 3rd floor bathroom. It was 60 square foot. They you know, made some shelves in the shower for me, but I'm going to get a real office. And she said, yeah, well, my first office at ANJAC, my files were in the tub. So you got your files in the shower. I kept my files in the tub. So it sounds like it could work out. I go, Candy. Okay, I'll think about it. And I'm just so thankful for her. And with regards to the Pines, I'm thankful to have a lifetime of homework from her. So she told me probably about 2 weeks before she passed, she said, Jen, you got to know the plan. And I said, what are you talking about, Candy? And she said, the Pinelands. You have to know the plan. Everything has to be rooted in the plan. You've got to know that plan. And I said, okay, Candy, I'll get to know the plan. And so that's my lifetime of homework from Candy. And I'm so incredibly grateful to have that. She's a mentor, she's a role model. And I'm so thankful to have all of you who knew her as long or longer than I have. And through our relationships and our continued work to protect, preserve, restore New Jersey's environment, she's going to live on and on and on. And we've all got her in our head. So thank you all for being here in this weird time to be able to share and celebrate her life with her, with all of us tonight. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Liz Ritter, who was not only professionally close, but personally close with Candy. And she is ANJAC's deputy director, and she's going to close us out for the evening. So thank you, everybody. Oh, and I did pour a glass of Chardonnay because for the past 10 years, that was her drink of choice when I was around. I never had the martinis with her, but I'm gonna close us out with this as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Hi, everybody. Before I share some short remarks of my own, I'm going to read something from Prue, Candy's first cousin. She said, I remember Candy getting me onto the Environmental Commission of Bedminster and starting a lifelong passion for our environment, recycling, protecting our trees, our waters, and now the island where I live, which is Amelia Island. For fond memories of fighting for the Great Swamp, the beautiful Blueberry Festival in the Pinelands, living across the road from Candy on the first Earth Day. So many memories. Rest in peace, Candy, from Prudence Hostetter. Thank you, Prudence. It's been a wonderful time here sharing all these wonderful tales of Candy. And like all of you, I've been so lucky to be taught and encouraged and friended by Candy. Almost 20 years ago when I started working at ANJAC, this lady came in and told me how to use Access, which I didn't even know was a thing. And I hope I never had to know it. I wish I never knew. But she taught me how to use it and she made me use it. And one time she helped me with equipment and all that stuff. And one time we were ordering equipment or we were talking about equipment and she said, come here. She walked me down the little hall of ANJAC and showed me this tiny little room that we have and said, that was my office when I first started here. And you know what used to be there? It was a bathtub and that's where I kept my files. So look how far we've come. So I said, okay, you're right, Candy. We can work with a bathtub. We can work with anything. So her encouragement and support, you know, I think we all know how much she mentored all of us and what she did and what she meant. In her last months when we were all stuck not being able to really see each other, we talked at least twice a week, and a lot of the time she was calling me to make sure I was okay, and I was calling her to make sure she was okay, and she was mad. She was mad that she was locked up. She was mad that she couldn't see anybody. And I went to see one of her neighbors to pick something up one time. I think it was in April. So I went to her front door to wave to her and said, I can't come this close and not see your face. And I waved to her. So that was the last time I saw her in person, of course. Like many of us, we were sort of stopped from seeing her. And I am lucky that the last few years of her life, most of what I got to do was socialize with her and be her friend more than her work colleague. But she still was always asking me about work and what could she do to help ANJAC and what were we doing and making sure ANJAC was going forward, and always offering her advice and well-loved advice and always telling me, giving me encouragement. And I couldn't thank her enough for all of that. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. I think we all can raise a glass or just cheer her in some way. And Thank you, Candy, and thank you to all of you for participating. ANJAC, the New Jersey Highlands Coalition, New Jersey Conservation Foundation, and Raritan Headwaters Association, we're proud to host this event. And we do hope you'll remember that Candy's wish was donations to any of those organizations in her memory. And I can't thank everybody enough, and cheers.
Cheers. Thank you, everybody, for being here with us tonight, helping us celebrate her life.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks,
Blessed
everyone.
And, we'll be environmentalists. Hang in there.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Stay safe.